You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Catholic Mama podcast. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn, and this week I'm excited to share a radio interview that I was doing just yesterday, actually, with my friend Gary Michuta. He is a Catholic apologist, and just a reminder, apologist doesn't mean that you're apologizing for anything. It's in defense of. So he is the go-to guy for anything relating to defending Catholics or Catholicism against any number of objections that people come up with. He actually was on the podcast not too long ago to talk about why Catholic Bibles are bigger than Protestant ones. You can go back and look at that episode. It's just, you know what? I should have checked. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what number it is. But anyway, so I was on his show. He has a live radio show every day at 12 p.m. Central Time. So it is at 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern. Every weekday. It's called On Apologetics and airs live through Virgin Most Powerful Radio, which is a great radio station and a Catholic one, which kind of makes it great anyway, but I'm not biased, right? Anyway, I was on yesterday. He asked me to come on. I think that was my third time on his show. And this time the topic was overcoming obstacles that Catholic parents face. And to make sure that I was answering and discussing the obstacles that more Catholic parents are facing than just myself, I went to Instagram and put up a little poll on my Instagram stories and asked people who are following along and saw that question to answer, what are the biggest struggles that you face as a Catholic mom or dad? And I got so many great responses. And the one thing that I really noticed is I was just curious, how many of those people, thank you if you were listening and you answered that question and you saw it, thank you. How many of the people that answered that question thought that they were the only ones struggling with this, whatever the objection or, the obstacle is? And as it turns out, many of you share the same struggles and fears and questions about raising faith-filled children. So I condensed it down to about 3 different themes and took that to Gary's show, where we talk about each of those. And he asked some great questions, I think, to really dive deep into the advice that I was giving. So I'm going to share that episode now. It's coming up next. I hope that you enjoy it. And please do click on the link in the show notes to go to my website, thecatholicmama.com. And, there'll be some easy links that you can click through to find Gary's show. You can also find him at Gary Michuta, 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 GaryMichuta.com, and find all his works. He's an author, apologist, radio show host, writer, all around great guy. I'm actually going to a barbecue that he's hosting next week. So anyway, wonderful person, a lot of fun to talk to. And if you've heard my other couple of interviews on his show, I think that you'll agree as well. I hope you like this episode. I hope it's helpful. And don't forget to send me a message either through Instagram or my website, or even in the link in the show notes. There you can submit a question. I'm happy to discuss and look it over. So I'm very approachable. I hope you hear that in my voice that comes over the radio or the microphone. And I love hearing from you. Every time I get a message, I got to say, it really makes my day. Now, maybe not the bad ones. I don't get those too often, thank God. Quite literally, thank God. But for everybody who voices your support, asks questions, wants to know more, that's the whole reason I do this. Anyway, enjoy the show. I'm going to stop talking, and so you can hear me talk yesterday, if that makes sense.
We have our good friend Christine Flynn with us. Christine, of course, runs the CatholicMama.com podcast. She is the wife and mother of 4. As a convert to the Catholic faith, Christine's podcast and blogs are all things Catholicism to help fellow parents feel more sure in their faith and raising confident Catholic children. And if you go to her website at thecatholicmama.com, you can get a great free ebook, How to Talk to Your Kids About God, which helps parents answer tough theological questions simply and truthfully. And Christine, welcome back to Hands On Apologetics. I guess we've lost our guest for a second. So let's talk a little bit about raising our kids while we're trying to get it back. Christine Flynn. As I mentioned, she runs this podcast, thecatholicmama.com, which is great because she gets lots of feedback from Catholic parents as to, how to overcome obstacles, practical advice, things like that. And so when we were preparing for the show, I suggested, why don't we pick a few of the biggest obstacles that Catholic parents face today? Because, quite frankly, when I was younger, the obstacles my parents faced was completely different than today. And I'm sure when they grew up, again, they ran into other enemies of the faith that I never encountered in my life. So, it's a constantly changing environment. So it's important for us Catholics to be able to gather together, pull information, and offer suggestions helps. Maybe something might be very effective in your household, and it'd be great for you to be able to share it with other Catholic parents who are struggling with it. And so that's why I'm very supportive of Christine's ministry at thecatholicmama.com, because it enables that kind of forum. And so when you have that forum, you can ask, what are the obstacles? And you can come on to Hands On Apologetics and share what you heard and what you learned. And Richard just flashed the message that we do have our guest. So Christine Flynn, welcome to Hands On Apologetics.
Hey, Gary. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. It's one of those weeks. We had a tough weekend. I guess there was a bad storm by the studio in California, and Monday's broadcast was a little rough. So, this is just par for the course for us. So no problem.
Because at first I could see your lovely face on the screen, but I could not hear anything, and then everything just went downhill from there.
Oh, okay. Well, probably it's better if you didn't hear me. At least I
like listening to your early church fathers bit. I was excited to hear it, and I was so sad I couldn't figure this out right away.
Well, I appreciate that. So while we were trying to get you back on the air, I was talking a little bit about your podcast ministry with the CatholicMama.com and how important it is, because there's so many new challenges today that, even my older brothers faced that, I've faced different enemies that they faced. My parents, likewise. It's constantly changing environment, and to be a Catholic parent raising kids now, you kind of have to pool your information with other parents to help adjust and find effective ways to overcome these the enemies of the faith.
Yeah, it wasn't one of the reasons that I even initially thought about becoming Christian, or I guess Christian in general, or even going to church, was around the time my son was maybe 2 or 3. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to teach him everything all on my own. I mean, at some point, children listen to their parents to a certain age, and then, other influences become top of the list. And then they do listen to their parents still, hopefully, but what their friends think or what they see on TV really starts to make an impact. And it was then, and I was still a pretty heavy atheist at this point, but it was then I realized that I did believe in some sort of morality. I knew that there was a right and a wrong, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. And that was one of the things that helped me to start very carefully to consider something besides the atheism I had ascribed to at that point.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And how long have you been doing this, as far as the website and the podcast and blog?
So today is July 1st. It's been about 2 years and 1 month.
All right.
I'm a relatively new Catholic. I just came into the faith. I was baptized Easter Vigil
in 2018. And then shortly after that, I left my full-time office job and realized that I had no more excuses as to not doing this sort of thing. So it started out, I don't think I intended to go the route that I have initially. I think I just wanted to share recipes, but then I realized that's not where God was calling me to do, and to use my talents differently.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And, what's so good about it, I think, is, again, as a parent, you might try something. It might not work. It might go down in flames. You might try a different tactic, and it works beautifully. But the thing is, it would be so helpful to share that information with others, because they might be encountering the same thing, and they'll just make the same mistakes you did, or they discover a better way than you tried to help form their kids.
Yeah. When we were talking about what to discuss on this episode of your show, I was like, you know what, I'm going to crowdsource some ideas. So I went to my Instagram account where I spend a lot of my Catholic Mama time when I'm not podcasting. And I asked some of my followers there, what do you feel are the biggest hindrances to raising faith-filled children in these days? And there were some really obvious themes, but I guarantee that a lot of the people that were, jotting down an answer and sending it to me when I asked, they probably think that they might be one of the only ones who feels this way. And that is just, that's the devil, right? The devil likes to divide us and makes us feel like we are alone in our struggles. But the feelings, the struggles that we have as parents and our fears of raising Catholic children who are going to stay in the faith, that's really common. And even, every once in a while I'll meet, not every once in a while, but I'll meet a new Catholic friend or something, and they're raising their kids and they're trying to really bring the Catholic faith deep into their lives. I'm like, oh, thank goodness there's more of us. But there's a lot of us. So I don't want anybody to think that anything that we're going to cover today it's unique. I mean, it's there's so many. If you are a faithful Catholic and you're a parent these days, you're going through this stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point too. You're right. It's so tempting to think that we're the kooks on the fringe. No one else is experiencing this. When it's really comforting to know. Although it's sad that everybody's struggling the same way, but it's comforting to know that there are other people who are encountering the same kind of stuff, same kind of struggles, dealing with the similar issues, and that we're not alone.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, anytime you turn on the news or the media, look at social media or whatever, it'll make it seem like whatever craziness is happening is the norm. And it's not. It's just what's loud. And there are a lot of relatively normal folks, or maybe some super weird extra Catholics out there, but they're there, and we're not alone on our struggles at all.
That's right. Okay, well, why don't we jump into one of them, before the first break?
Sure, yeah.
What popped up on the radar screen?
I think the one that came up the most is how to protect children without over-sheltering them, which is that's a balance. I think it's the most important thing that we can think about in any of these issues is that, we are the stewards of our children and our children's souls. I mean, our children belong to God, but He entrusted their parents and caretakers to bring them back to heaven. So, it's not anybody else's job. It's our job. So we have to really take ownership of this. But as far as when you think about how to protect children without over-sheltering them, I think it really does depend on the age and the amount of reasoning that your child can already do. Since so much of our culture is hypersexualized, I think children should be given the opportunity to learn about themselves outside of this sexual act and this hypersexualization of the culture. So when it comes to making sure you're not sheltering your kid too much, when it comes to anything, that's this hypersexualized stuff, I actually err on the side of being very protective over that. They're going to get out in the world and that's going to happen anyway, but you can, kind of lead them into that. I remember seeing a study that said back in 2005, so 15 years ago, already 2/3 of television programming had sex in some way, whether people were talking about it, engaging in it, in some way. It was like, it's so sexualized. And we really have to protect our kids from that, and give them a chance there to not think that their only reason for their person is to engage in that in some way. So I personally I err very much on the side of caution when it comes to that. But then there's other things. I think that you just have to be aware of what you're okay with. So are you okay with some violence in TV or movies? Well, then decide what kind of violence or how much violence that is. Are you okay with some bad language? Okay, well, how much and to what purpose? There's a difference between gratuitous violence and somebody defending themselves, or defending, an animal or something like that. So I think you really should become very clear for yourself on what you're okay with and have some good reasons as to why you are or are not okay with things. I mean, even if I got caught by surprise watching the second Incredibles movie, it wasn't anything that bad, but the kids were bickering a lot and they were talking back to their parents. And I have small children who they get it now. They know that they're not supposed to talk like this. But if I hadn't stopped the movie in that moment and said, "Oh boy, this isn't very good behavior. What do you think?" and let them talk about it, they either retain that as good or neutral behavior. So it really does come down to us reacting in the moment and also understanding what we are and are not okay with before going into this sort of thing.
Yeah, no, great advice. And that is such a tricky area too, because there is no clear cut, do X, Y, and Z, and then you know that you're not over sheltering or under sheltering. It really requires a lot of discernment. And I like how you put there are some things that are just clearly out of bounds and you can't tolerate them.
Yeah, and especially if you're hearing people talk a certain way, say you're out in public and you hear people behaving or acting a certain way. Again, kids are going to notice this stuff, even if they aren't going to turn around and ask you about it. They're taking this all in. So, and it's the same reason why it's so important to really live the faith in your own home and your own lives, because kids are watching that. Of course they are. And the same goes for what they're consuming. And even studies have shown that, very good studies, that the younger a child watches anything with anything sexual in it, the more likely they are to engage in sexual behavior early on, like by a couple of years even. So, you got to talk about these things with your kids and also set those boundaries. But that it really depends on yourself,
Very good. We're chatting with Christine Flynn, who is the podcaster for thecatholicmama.com, how to overcome obstacles and challenges in Catholic parenting. Stay tuned, folks.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics with Gary Michuta on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Christine Flynn of the CatholicMama.com podcast ministry and talking about chief obstacles that we encountered when trying to keep our kids Catholic. And our first obstacles to how to protect your children without sheltering them. And, I have to say, as you know, I have children, they're now in their 20s. But I remember, where that line of toleration and intoleration was certainly moved. Like if I had young children now, there would be certain things that I wouldn't even, I would strictly forbid it being in my house. Where before, I think I'd be more tolerant. Like for example, gaming, computer games, things like that.
Yeah, Pat, my husband is very good about this. We've talked about this a lot, is finding that balance, because we both know kids who were raised in very stifling, strict homes and then turned around and had horrible addictions with drugs or gambling or any number of things. Yeah. So that's the fear, right? You think you're doing something right and then you mess up in the end, kind of big time. So it is this blend. So, I'm not opposed to computer games. I actually like video games. I like the nice ones, though, that there aren't even any bad guys, but I'm a big wussy about that.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah.
Pac-Man, stuff like that.
I can't pretend, my brother was a big gamer, too, growing up, and his hand-eye coordination, though, is phenomenal. And Pat's is as well, and they were both gamers. Now, did they both play video games too much? Probably. And that's something that could have changed and I won't allow. But I guess when it comes to, rather than saying the things that you can't do, help them develop disciplines that they should have. So say and this reminded me when you said about the video or the computer games or video games, our oldest is only 6 still. So there's a lot of this stuff we're still figuring out. And of course we get to do it in one of the craziest, starts to a decade in recent memory. But he loves playing video games and he loves watching TV, and he's like this since he was a baby or a toddler. And I tried not to let him watch this stuff, but here we are, and we let him because I know that he would be miserable and it would be unfair for me to try to take it all away. So we ration it. But one of the things that he has to do before he's even allowed to touch any kind of remote is he has to say a decade of the rosary. He has to practice his piano. He has to do some math. Like there's things that he just, and we don't tell him that we'll say maybe it's a reward, but we make a point of saying, well, we're making sure that you're developing good habits. Like it's a lot about the positioning of it, and also making sure that we're offering, no, you can't watch this show. Okay, well, what can I watch, or what can I do? Rather than, I've heard this a lot from parenting experts. Don't just say no to a kid, do this. So don't just cut things off and say, no, you can't do this, but give them a good alternative and give that guidance. I mean, we got to remember, we are the stewards, we're the good shepherds, and we really do have to, we can't expect that children are going to know the better way. And we have to be the ones to show them that.
Yeah, very good. And very well said, too. What's another obstacle that Catholic parents run into?
I think it kind of piggybacks on what you said a second ago, like you wouldn't allow certain things into your home. And one of the things that came up, people would ask, what do you do if you have family members who are nominal Catholics, or you have family members who are anti-Catholic, or family members who are living openly sinful lives? How do you deal with that? And I think the one thing to remember, now this is a lot easier said than done, is your home is your rules, right? So if we have people coming into our house, it's a Catholic house, so they're saying grace, they're not going to get drunk, they're not going to say bad words. And actually, not too long ago, we had a family member who was clearly had some drug issues, trying to be around our children, and we had to tell them that they couldn't be near us. And it wasn't even like really, really noticeable. Like I don't know if my children would have noticed it, but my husband and I knew. And so they just had to leave. I mean, it was tough, but to tell somebody that they couldn't be near us at that point because of this, but it's our home. And it's the domestic church. You wouldn't allow somebody in certain circumstances to behave a certain way in a church. So you don't let that in your own house. And even still, my dad is a fallen away Catholic, but it is well known that if you're going to eat dinner in our house, then you're going to say grace before a meal, even if you don't believe it. You're not going to put us in a position where we have to explain away things in our own house, because we're going to get that stuff outside the home all the time.
Right. Yeah. The tricky thing with family, though, is that you're absolutely, I love that, the idea of the domestic church, and, essentially it's your castle. You get to put up whatever walls you wish to put up. But with family, sometimes you have to go visit relatives, certainly on holidays, you go away. Do you have any advice for maybe when you're outside the domestic church?
Yeah. We run into this all the time too. Yep. I'm right there. It's not as simple as I made it sound, because it is very difficult, even if it is your own house. But when you go elsewhere, we've had talks with my family leading up to Christmas months in advance. This is Christmas. This is Christ's birthday. We are celebrating it as a religious holiday or whatever. We have those discussions both with the family that we're going to visit and with our children leading up to it. So, of course, we're not going to say, well, we're going to Grandma's house and how she feels, blah, blah, with our kids. No, we're just explaining the reason for the season with the kids, or we're explaining, it's not just like this in the moment scrambling to try to make sense of some behavior that we know is inappropriate. It is an ongoing conversation. Like I said, I was talking about the following Christmas with my parents in January, just so that we were clear on expectations. So it's a conversation with the people that you're going to. And again, it's not easy. This is not an easy thing. I got to tell you, I sweat buckets sometimes just thinking of having to, confront's not the right word, because it's not like it's antagonistic, but to bring up these topics with family members. Even Jesus had a hard time, right? Even in his own hometown, they didn't think that he had much to say to them. So it's certainly not easy, but we do the conversations early and often with the people that we're visiting and with our own children. And of course, the messages may be different. depending on what the issue is that you think is going to arise. And then, of course, always debriefing afterwards. Again, if you don't talk to your kids, either they're going to assume that it's neutral or good behavior, and that it's just okay. So that, it'll become ingrained in them. The better thing to do is to debrief after, even if you don't think your kids notice that much, to say in the car ride home or whatever. And cars are a great place to talk about any sensitive topic, because you're both looking, everybody's looking forward. You don't have to look at each other in case you're embarrassed.
Right.
And just say, when so-and-so said this, what did you think about that? And kind of let the kids lead the conversation and guide them and let them know the truth, which we are bound to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could be like walking a tightrope, because you don't want to, dissipate their affection for, family members, to make them, you know what I mean? You want them to be loving to family members, and yet also be able to discern, well, such and such a family member, unfortunately, is struggling with a particular sin or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what happened with this drug incident recently in our home. We had, the person had to pack up and leave, and my oldest was like, well, why does she have to go? And I said, well, she's got a lot of problems, and your father and I are trying to help her as best we can. And we've prayed a lot about it, and this is what we think is the best thing for her. So we were very honest about it. And, as I said, she loves us, she loves you, but for now, this is, we have to do what's right, and this is what's right. So it wasn't easy, but we did make a point of saying this is all done out of charity, and that, so hopefully, I'm hoping, this is just a few weeks ago. I'm hoping that over time, this doesn't lessen any of that affection that they should have for whatever family members. Because we love the sinner, but we hate the sin, and we have to teach our children how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and boy, especially with holidays too. Now, I'm not necessarily with your own personal experience, but are there occasions where you have to draw the line, say, well, no, we're not going to go over Aunt so-and-so's house, and maybe not tell them? But, I mean, is there a line where you would have to cut off contact no matter what?
Yeah, I don't know. Pat and I have talked about this as well, because we have some family members who act on their homosexual tendencies. And one is in a serious relationship with a girl. And we're like, well, if they ever get married, what do we do? And the truth is, we tell the person that we love them, but we can't go. And it's not that simple, but of course it's in practice, it's very difficult. I think it was Aquinas, I could be getting this totally wrong, that, we're under a moral obligation to tell somebody the truth, right? But we can hold our tongue if we feel like it's going to alienate them away from God even more. Yeah. So we should never participate in a lie or some immoral behavior. But maybe you do, because it'll be better in the long run. Go to your cousin's wedding, and because she is having a gay marriage or a gay union or something like that. But maybe you don't bring your children, just because it's something that you don't know if you're going to be able to adequately explain given their certain age or something like that. And maybe you go and just say, I love you, but I don't support what you're doing. Yeah, it's a very tricky balance. I mean, if for anybody who has any very particular questions, that is a beautiful thing about our parish priests. Make an appointment and ask, and if ask a couple priests if you need a couple different opinions. But definitely take them up on that resource. I do it sometimes too, because we don't know all the answers, but it's good to have somebody who's steeped in the faith be able to give their perspective.
Yeah, it's tough to live a virtuous life on your own, let alone when you have children who are not necessarily looking up to you, but, they're watching and learning, and you're forming them. That makes even, difficult situations even more difficult.
Yeah, sin is messy. And it's the more, it gets tangled up, and when you have to try to untangle it, to just explain it to children. Now, of course, young children especially, and we've talked about this before, they're natural philosophers and theologians. They ask really good questions, and they have really good insights, and they know what the difference between good and evil. They know the difference between what a girl is and a boy is, But over time, this stuff gets really messy and tangled, and you have to guide them along to whatever's age appropriate for them.
Very good. We're chatting with Christine Flynn of thecatholicmama.com. More to come on the other side of the break. Listen to Hands On Apologetics. And we are looking at some of the chief challenges, obstacles to keeping your kids Catholics as Catholic parents, and chatting with Christine Flynn of thecatholicmama.com website. Check it out, folks. And, Christine, I want to maybe go back really quick because you made a really important point that I think a lot of Catholic parents miss. And that's not only do you have to protect your children in terms of, their innocence and integrity, but you also have to protect your own authority as well. Like you mentioned, you're watching the Incredibles 2 movie where, they show the kids as pushing back with their parents. And I was just thinking, in my own family, we had a friend who was kind of, chumming up to our kids, and, everything was fine, but we started learning that behind our backs, they were telling them things like, you don't have to listen to what they have to say. You're a teenager, you could do whatever you want. And we basically had to tell the person, you're not welcome here because they're undermining our authority.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, we have, that's number 4 on the commandment list. So we really do have to pay attention to that one. And I think that's really impressive that you said no to that person being around, because you could say, oh, kids will be kids will rebel, that's just their youth or whatever, but it doesn't have to be, that shouldn't just be the default that we assume. Of course kids are have more energy and they question things, but they should be met, we should hope that they will question us with respect. And I think the way that you get that, it's twofold. We expect our children to respect and honor their mothers and fathers, but we have to model that ourselves in the way that we treat them, and also the way we treat our own parents, right? So they have to see us being the best Catholic role models we possibly can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and unfortunately, in media, it's almost like it's inevitable that kids will rebel against their parents, even encouraged. And I know a lot of parents who don't really care what their kids watch. They'll watch cartoons where the kids are rebellious and the parents are non-consequential, and then they're wondering why their kids don't listen to them. It's like
we have a very
together.
tight. I mean, our kids have gotten used to us. Like they'll try to put something on, and we're like, no, that'll make your brain mush. No, try something else. No. But I will suggest for any parent looking for something good for like a movie night, there is a website called CatholicAllYear.com, I believe is what it is. It's Kendra Tierney, and she has 10 children. Of course, if you have 10 kids, I mean, they range in age quite a bit. And she has a great list of appropriate movies for all ages in the family. And even if it is something that may be geared towards the older children, she will make notes on points that maybe would be a bit of a problem, and how to talk to your kids about those, and what to pick out and have a conversation, which I think is really important. It goes back to us wanting to protect our children but not over shelter them. So if it is appropriate, if you feel like you could adequately explain something in a movie or a TV show to whatever age your child is, then maybe it's okay to watch it as a family, as long as you're there to explain it to them and make them understand why it is good or why it's bad, or why it's right behavior or wrong behavior.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Very good. That's great. So it's CatholicAllYear.com. Is that the?
I believe it is. Yeah. And actually, she does a lot on liturgical living. She's the queen of feast days, celebrating feast days. So cool. I always default to a book of hers called Catholic All Year, I think. So yeah, if you look for that, you'll find something similar at least. And she is, I think it's 100 movies on that list at least.
Nice. Yeah, that's good to know. Well, I think we have enough time for maybe one more. What was another obstacle that was brought up?
Yeah, the last one was that came up a lot is how to handle a liberal agenda in the public schools. And especially, I think people were talking about sex education. And this is actually a great time to talk about this on your shows, because I just did a podcast last month with Maura from Modern Catholic Mom, who used to go around giving talks on theology of the body to teenagers. And so we had a big talk. It's actually episode 120, I think, 120 of my show, how to talk to your kids about theology of the body, how to teach your kids theology of the body. And so we had a great talk on this. And the main point is, again, you're the steward of your child's soul. You're in charge of your child's upbringing. And this whole idea of the talk or the sex education, this isn't just, a one-time deal. This is an ongoing conversation or set of lessons, depending on the age. So the first thing, if you are struggling with the liberal agenda or maybe the hypersexualized agenda in your kids' education, I would suggest first, and this is I'm getting this from Maura herself, is asking the school district for the documents and the resources that they'll be using in their sex education, and make sure that even if you opt your child out of any kind of education, you have to use that time teaching them something important, because otherwise their friends who didn't get opted out of this education will be telling them all this stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I remember one Saturday morning, my mom called me into her room and she's like, okay, here we go. Let's have the talk. And I was like, oh, don't worry about that. I heard everything from so-and-so's older sister. And my mom practically wiped her brow going, phew, okay, go ahead, go play. And I came to know years later how wrong and how, I didn't know anything. My friend's older sister knew nothing. But that's where I learned. And unfortunately, because I had a parent who just wasn't comfortable with giving me that kind of information face to face. So it's early and often, and as taxpayers, if you have a child in the public school, you're within your rights to ask for those resources that they're going to be using, to complain about the resources that they're using. I mean, you got to, again, it's your job, no one else's. So even if it makes you super uncomfortable to either talk to your own children about this, or you really just don't feel like getting into it with other people. And I know it's exhausting. I just got the online mob descended on me last week for something, and it's exhausting. And like I said, I didn't particularly want to take a stand, but I knew that if I didn't, who else is? So we have to start speaking up, whether that is directly to the school boards themselves, or just making sure that we are not constantly, but regularly having these conversations with our children about what the truth is, what the Catholic Church teaches. And a lot of this comes down to what we've talked about on previous episodes, spending time, having an active faith life with your children, and being a faith role model, and that every truth that we need to find and know about is in the Catholic Catechism, or is in some encyclical or something. It's in the Church. So never forget to lean back on that, and just it's your responsibility. Right. We can't just think that somebody else is going to do it for us or do it better than us. There's nobody better to teach our children any of these things, whether it's theology of the body or right behavior and respect towards elders or our parents. All this stuff comes down to us. It's an exhausting occupation, as I know you know.
Yeah. You can only protect them from things that you know about. And I know one problem with kids going, that aren't homeschooled, they're going to public schools, is, you ask them, how was your day? What happened? You're lucky if you get a 1 or 2 word answer. But, it doesn't necessarily even just be sex ed. It could be, different statements and things that teachers could say, or, that could be against the faith that your child just imbibes because they're in a classroom. And
and I think that makes you make a good point. It's what you don't know, whether that's because you don't know exactly what's going on in the classroom. How can you? Because you're not there. But you can't defend things that you don't know how to defend them in the first place. So, if you don't know how to best explain some teaching of the Catholic Church, find out how to do that. And at least, you might not be able to say, oh, so, your teachers made this statement today, so let me refute that if with 5 reasons of why that's incorrect. But if we have to trust that our kids are listening to us. So we should be spending time. Our kids should know us as we want to know them. And I think a huge part, the first thing that we should always prioritize in spending time with our children is having a faith life with our children. And just read the Catechism with your kids. Anything that helps to grow the faith And if they're old enough, I mean, get them interested in apologetics sooner rather than later, right? So they can see that there's actually real reason and logic behind all this stuff. It's not just some arbitrary rules from people who don't want you to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned that it's important not only to know that, know the answer, but at least to know there is an answer that exists. It's not like, well, teacher said X, well, I guess that's irrefutable. It's even if your mom and dad has a book on their shelf that talks about in depth from a Catholic perspective, that in itself can help inoculate some of the aberrant stuff that's out there.
Yeah, I saw one political cartoon once, and it was a teacher at the front of the class and says, "I want you to be educated free thinkers who do exactly as I say." So you just make sure. And I remember once saying to a teacher of mine in high school, like, "Oh, well, so and so is an adult, so they probably know what they're talking about." And my teacher, I looked like her head was going to explode. She's like, "Whoa, that is not true." So it's interesting because you need your children to learn how to obey and respect you, but you don't want them to just have blind obedience to any adult or any idea that an adult says. So it's a lot of hard work, and it's constant vigilance, and also a lot of prayer. I mean, on any of these things, I think the first thing, if you're not sure how to go about doing something, is pray. If you're not sure how to talk to a family member about their openly gay lifestyle at Christmas time, well, pray about that, and then ask a parish priest. Ask, or I don't know, pray and ask a priest, I think, is probably my two biggest ones if you're really stumped.
Yeah, no, that's excellent advice. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with your ministry. Who have you had on recently, and where can people go to access all the great stuff you have?
Well, I had John DeRosa on recently, of course, to
great.
talk about his book on atheist slogans, which was so good because I used to say this. I used to say those slogans sometimes way back when. And again, Maura from Modern Catholic Mom did a wonderful job in helping talk about how to teach children theology of the body. And actually, one of my most popular episodes recently, that was one of them. And also, I had a mom on who has 7 children, and we talked about just practical tips on how to have a big family life. Like, how do you feed these people? Where do they sleep? And so that was a really interesting one that a lot of moms got a lot out of.
That's awesome. Well, okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, it's Christine Flynn, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, check it out. It's at thecatholicmama.com. Lots of great stuff and great resources, and as you can tell, great information. Oh, man, I can't believe the hour has flown. But never fear, coming up next, Terry and Jesse will soon be here with the Terry and Jesse Show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and God willing, we'll be back again tomorrow with Carol Keating. And
Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy-to-understand grown-up answers, the pared-down but not talked-down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.